What a great group. I'm going to be sitting in all of your classes. Today I sat in Dr. Hartenberg's class, and I will be kind of rotating amongst the three and slowly getting to know you. I will call you by your first name. Anyway, let me just, we have so much to cover. Let me go quickly over the one-page syllabus that I sent you with my own information. My office is actually not where the other Honors College folks are. Mine is in the UAC, right across from the beautiful art gallery that we have. So you can visit me there, but I will be visiting here all the time. And let me just go quickly. I hope most of you have read this already. 3 important things. First of all, we're supposed to end this at 7:45. I'm probably moving too much. Can you keep up with me? I'll stay here. Okay. We get to stay here until 5:45, about an hour and a half, a little bit less. And then there's a class that comes in here. Now, we'll have, you could do a little Q&A before the people come in, but you probably noticed that there are tables out there, those little tables. What I'm going to do is, after we're done here, I will move myself out to one of those tables so we can continue doing one-on-one Q&A, either one-on-one or like a group of you, and I can stay there till like 6:25. Dinner's at 6:30, we live close. So I can hang out as long as 6:25 over there, then my wife will come get me. So again, if you have, because there's so much to cover, there's not going to be a lot of time for Q&A here, and there's so many of us, but I will move over there and we will continue the discussion, continue the dialogue, okay? Number 2 is that for every new honors class, I take you all through the screw tape letters. Now, if you've been getting my emails, unfortunately, one section is not going to be able to do it in the fall. I know it's unfair, but everything's a little just, we're getting this together. But at least the 2 sections, the one that meets on Monday or whatever, and the one that meets earlier on Thursday, will be able to come. And what we will be doing is every Thursday, your class ends at 4:05. Every Thursday from 4:10 to 4:50, we will meet in Atwood 1, room 110. That's where Dr. Hartenberg's class is. I think Dr. Snell's class is right next door. Those of you that are in, which class is the one that can't come to screw tape? Which one is that? Is that the one that's meeting in Hinton? Or the one, is it Dr. Snell's or Dr. Lizo?
It's Dr. Snell.
It's Snell, okay, so you guys are there. Those of you that are with Lizo, I think that's in the Hinton building. So you just walk over to Atwood 1, room 110, which is right next to where the offices are. And again, we will be going through 1 letter per session, and you also get a CLW point, which is nice. So I'll have a sign-in sheet for you all. And I do this for the Honors College students, but other people can come. It's open to any HBU students. But I don't tell everybody because I like to use this as a way for you to get to know each other and discuss, issues, moral, ethical issues and all. And we're going to do 1 letter a week. So if you miss a few weeks, just come. I do have about 10 copies of my own that I'll bring each time. But if you have a copy of the screw tape letters, bring it with you. I don't know if you know that, but this week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, is a 20% off sale at Half Price Books. So go over there, you could probably find the screw tape letters for a couple bucks, okay? So you don't have to have a copy, but if you intend to come more than a few times, bring it if you want to take notes or something. And again, that is not mandatory, but I've done it with every freshman class of honor students for the last 4 years. Finally, every Thursday night, my wife and I do a Bible study at our house. We've done this since I started teaching here 22 years ago. And again, on the bottom I gave you directions. Our house is literally less than a mile over here. You can just Google it, but we're just right over here across the street from a park. And what we do is every Thursday we gather about 8:15. We kind of talk a little bit. From about 8:30 to 9 o'clock we do worship. I've got song sheets with like 100 hymns and 50 chorus songs. If we have a lot of homeschooling girls that like to sing hymns. Where are my homeschoolers, by the way? Oh, there are a lot of you. Okay, good, because they're particularly good at singing hymns. But anyway, we will sing hymns, and again, I've got a piano. It's a lot of fun. And then the Bible study goes from 9 to 9:30. Sometimes we go late. When the Bible study's over, anybody that wants to stay on can stay on as late as they want. I mean, like some stay till 2 in the morning. And we sing Disney songs. I've made up new... How many of you sang in the chapel with us the other day? Okay, good. I brought them with me. I've got, there's like 50 songs, but I also have song sheets with all the words from Les Mis, like 10 songs from Les Mis. And I've got another song sheet with 10 songs or 8 songs from Phantom of the Opera. And I've got, other things. And I can play any musical or anything you want. Now, what we're going through, and that you also get a CLW point for that. What we're going through this year is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I'm a C.S. Lewis specialist. And how many of you have ever heard the Focus on the Family radio play versions of that? Have you ever heard that? Okay, we're going to be listening to that, kind of like a chapter a week and discussing it. And by the way, in Screwtape Letters, we'll be listening to the Focus on the Family Screwtape that has Andy Serkis, better known as Gollum, playing Screwtape, and he's really, really good. So anyway, now, as you all know, this Thursday, 2 days from now, is our opening Honors College induction, and it goes from 7 to 9. So I will have to sneak out about 8 o'clock. Please, when it's over at 9, just come over to Bible study. You can be late the first time. We won't say anything. And we don't start the Bible study itself until about 9. So you'll miss a little worship in the beginning. But like I said, we're literally a 2-minute drive over. You could walk, but you're American, so you won't. But you could walk to my house. Okay, so very, very close. The last thing, on the bottom here, I have all sorts of allergies. I mean, I've got the regular allergies. I'm allergic to cats and dogs and dust and pollen. I'm allergic to Democrats. I'm allergic to common things. But I also have what are called chemical allergies. I am deathly allergic to all perfume, cologne, scented candles, potpourri, Windex, Glade, everything. I'm extremely allergic to these magic markers. That's why I need the chalkboard over here. So please don't wear perfume or cologne to class. Usually the girls are not guilty. It's the guys wearing some nasty cologne. Anyway. So please, especially if you come to my house, don't wear any perfume or cologne. It gives me an asthma attack, so you don't want to kill me. All right, we must dive in. I sent you, it's all right if you don't have it, but I sent you a packet, and I think the first or second page of the packet is a list of all the gods, and that's what we're going to go over today. And what I like to do in these lectures, they're going to be real intensive. We're going to move quickly. We're going to cover a lot of stuff. What I try to do in all these lectures is be very synthetic. Now, when I say synthetic, I don't mean artificial. Synthetic comes from the word synthesis. I'm going to try to draw together lots and lots of things, some of which you may have heard before, but you may not have known the connections before. So we are going to try to make lots and lots of connections in these lectures. And one of the greatest joys of education is the aha moment. You know what that is? When basically you have something in your English class and your biology class and your business class, and they suddenly go together, and you're like, wow, and a light bulb flashes, and you make a new connection. Now, I've spent my life having those light bulb flashes, and that's why my hair was burnt off at a very early age, okay? Actually, I have the same amount of hair I did as I was when I was your age. It's just that my brain has gotten so big, the hair can't keep up with it. It's true. All right. So let us work our way through Greek mythology, and I'll write some stuff on the board here. Now, according to the Bible, God created the world ex nihilo. Can somebody tell me what that means? Out of, no, you can just shout out. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, if you would like to bring laptops to this class, you may, if you want to take notes, okay? I noticed some of you have, so that's fine if you want to take notes. Ex nihilo is Latin for out of nothing. A nihilist literally believes in nothing. Now, you need to understand that the Bible is the only ancient book that says that God created the world out of nothing. In every single mythology across the world, including that modern myth we call Darwinian evolution, and every myth, in the beginning was not God. The Bible says in the beginning God. Mythology says in the beginning was stuff. Was undifferentiated matter or stuff. And the Greeks had a word for this stuff, this undifferentiated matter. They called it chaos. And chaos is a Greek word that came directly into our language. It's what we call a transliteration. It's chaos in Greek. We just bring it into English that way as well. In the beginning was matter or stuff. Again, the Judeo-Christian view says that in the beginning was God, in the beginning was spirit. In mythology, in the beginning was stuff or chaos. And out of the chaos, none of you probably remember Carl Sagan, he died before you were born, but he called it the cosmic soup. Out of this primordial stuff came everything. Not only trees and plants and animals and men, but the gods also came out of the primal chaos. And this is true in Egyptian mythology, Norse mythology, Native American Indian mythology. Always in the beginning is the matter, and stuff comes out of it. Now, for the Greeks, out of chaos came night, also came love, not the love we think of today, but a sort of primordial love that draws things together. And out of the original chaos came Gaia, spelled different ways, or Gaia, or in Greek it's just G-E, Ge. And does anybody know what geo means? It means the earth, as in geology. So out of the original chaos comes the primordial force of earth, right? And in Greek mythology, and in really every mythology I know of, Gaia, or the earth, is always a feminine deity. It's always female, right? Mother Earth, we sometimes say. Now, out of Gaia, out of the earth, was born the heavens, or Uranos. In Latin, it is Uranus, like the planet. Okay? That word is the Greek word for heaven. In fact, when Greeks say the Our Father, they say, Our Father who art in Uranos. Okay, it's still the same word used, heaven, right? And Uranos, again, is always a masculine principle. So these are the original feminine and masculine principles, Gaia and Uranos, earth and heaven, or sometimes we just say earth and sky. And those are the original deities. Now, what's interesting is that there are lots of mythologies, especially from parts of Africa, that are very much focused on the Earth Mother. Even though Greek mythology begins with the Earth Mother, Greek mythology is very much a sky god religion. It focuses much more on the male gods, though there are female gods. It is much more a sky god religion. Now, the country that probably has the most fascinating mythology and the most complicated is India. And India is a perfect fusion. They have just as many earth goddess mothers. Some of them are really scary, like Kali, there's skulls around her and stuff. And they also have sky fathers as well. But for the Greeks, it is much more a sky father-focused mythology. Now, Uranos, the male principle, and Gaia, the female principle, are the ones who have lots and lots of offspring. And if you think about it, literally, when the rain is coming down and soaking the earth, it's almost literally impregnating the earth. So it makes sense that in almost all mythologies, you have the sky impregnating the earth. And these two give birth to a race of titans. Now, the titan that you probably all have heard of the most is Prometheus. He was a titan. A lot of you have heard of Atlas, the one who holds up the heavens on his back, right? Ocean itself was a titan. Those are those ones that are locked up in the Disney version of Hercules, okay? Those are the titans, and they usually are forces of nature themselves. They're really, really tough. But in addition to giving birth to the titans, they also gave birth to a race of monsters, giants, Cyclops with the one eye in the center. They also gave birth to a certain kind of monster that had 50 heads and 100 arms. These are pretty terrifying creatures. Well, Uranos was terrified that one of these monstrous sons of his would overthrow him. And so, as they were born, he grabbed a hold of them and shoved them back into the earth. Almost literally shoving them back into the womb. And Gaia didn't like this, okay? Right? I mean, she was getting really bad indigestion. She's getting full. And finally, she needed to stop this. She needed a defender. And so she called aside her son, one of the titans, whose name is Kronos. And by the way, I'll tell you right now that on your midterm and on your, well, it's really just the final, spelling will and will not count. Let me explain what I mean by that, okay? There are various ways of spelling things. You've probably already realized that in the Greek language there is no C. So technically, we're supposed to spell Greek names with a K. And that's how that's how the Iliad is done by Lattimore. But more often we Latinize it and make it a C. So Hector can be spelled with a K or it can be spelled with a C. Socrates, all of those. So there are various ways of spelling it. So, if you have to put a name down on your test, Whether you spell it with a C or a K doesn't make a difference, but it needs to be phonetically correct, right? I need to know that if somebody is talking to you, you can say the name and they'll know what you're talking about. If you write the name Sophocles and you say, oh, I was spelling Socrates, that doesn't work, okay? So again, it needs to be phonetically correct in terms of your tests and whatnot. So Kronos is one of the Titans, and his name, by the way, in Latin, I'll give you these as we go along, because in the spring we'll be moving on to the Romans, is Saturn. Okay. Now, Gaia said, son Kronos, you need to stop me from your father. He's really bothering me. So Gaia gives Kronos a sickle, like you would use to harvest the wheat. And Kronos takes his sickle and hides behind a stone. And next time the urge comes upon his father and he swoops down to mate with the earth, Kronos jumps out with his sickle and he harvests his father's testicles. Sorry to start that way, but Greek mythology begins with a castration. Bothers me every time I say this. I've probably scared those kids up there. But anyway, this is how Greek mythology begins, with this sort of Oedipal violence of a son rising up against his father. Now, how many of you in high school read Edith Hamilton's Mythology? Did you use that? It's a very good book, or maybe even middle school. It is a good book, and it is pretty accurate, but you have to understand that she was a bit of a Victorian. So every so often, Edith Hamilton cleans up some of the myths, and in her version of this myth, which is really, really important, she says, Kronos hid behind a rock, and when his father showed up, he wounded him terribly. Now, how is that for a kind of euphemism there? Okay? I mean, that's a little bit worse than that. Well, I wish I could just stop there, folks, but I didn't write the Greek mythology. After castrating his father, he seizes the testicles in his hand. Okay? I'm going to draw a very rough drawing of it. Very rough drawing of it, okay. And he grabs them and he hurls them. Okay, I don't, maybe so they won't get reattached or something, I don't know. But hurls them, okay? And as they go along the earth, blood from the testicles falls on the earth. And it hits the earth, and it kind of riles up, and out springs Hillary Clinton. No, it wasn't that. And out springs hideous goddesses known as the Furies. Have you ever heard of the Furies? Furies. Now, the Greeks, I'm sorry, ladies, but they have a lot of hideous women in their mythology, right? You've heard of the Fates, and you've heard of the Gorgons, right? They're all sort of similar. Like Medusa, like the Gorgons, the Furies, we often think of three sisters, though there's different numbers given. But they have snakes for hair. They have kind of fangs for teeth that drip venom. Okay? And what the Furies do, their job is if you commit some kind of taboo sin, you do some terrible sin, they will chase you down like bloodhounds, physically, but also mentally. Now, what do I mean by a taboo? How's that different from a regular sin or crime? Okay? If you kill somebody, that is a crime, that is a sin. But if you kill your father, that makes it a taboo sin. What is it called if you kill your father? It's called patricide. What is it called if you kill your brother? Fratricide. What is it called if you kill someone who's been sleeping in your bed? It's called matricide. Okay, now you guys are very slow there. Okay, another example, right? If a man sleeps with a woman outside of marriage, that is fornication, that's a sin. But if a man sleeps with his sister, that is a taboo guilt called incest. Unless, of course, they're from Arkansas, and then it's just family values. Anyway, are you keeping up with me here? Okay, I know you're tired by the end of the day. Thank you. Woo, I like that. Very good. You try amen next time. Anyway. Okay, so when you commit a crime against your family, a couple weeks from now, you're going to read a group of plays called the Oresteia. Orestes kills his mother, matricide, and he is going to be chased down, literally, by the Furies. And it's interesting that the Furies are born out of, again, what we today would call Oedipal violence, of the son rising up against the father. Sort of sexual and physical violence combined together. Well, unfortunately, the stuff continues. It's got more to do. It continues, and it eventually falls into the ocean, just off of the island of Cyprus. And as soon as it hits the water starts frothing and foaming up, and out of the foam rises, well, does anybody know? Rises, not Athena, but Aphrodite. You got it. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, Venus, for the Romans. Now, I'm hoping all of you have seen that beautiful, wonderful painting by Botticelli called The Birth of Venus, where you see the beautiful Venus rising up in a shell, right? Well, now you know what happened 5 seconds before, okay? It's not quite so beautiful when you hear the whole story, okay? But she rose up out of the foam. And Hesiod, who tells the stories, says that the Greek word for foam is aphro, and he claims that that's where Aphrodite comes from, because she rose up on the foam. Well, Uranos kind of stumbles off, poor guy, okay? And Kronos becomes the new, head god, right? So first you've got Uranos and Gaia. That's the original first generation of gods. The second generation of gods are led by Kronos and his fellow Titans. Now, in good fashion, Kronos marries his sister, because, well, gods do that, marries his sister, whose name is Rhea, or in Latin, she's known as Ops. Again, Kronos is Saturn. Now, here's something really odd etymologically that might interest you, okay? Kronos is spelled like that, in Greek with a K. But there's a word that's very close in Greek. Instead of a K, it begins with an X, which in Greek is a CH, like Christos, and that is chronos. You know what that word means? Time, very good, as in chronology or chronometer, right? And it's just interesting, because what is Father Time generally depicted holding? A scythe or a sickle, right? A scythe. So they're obviously etymologically again, they're not really the same word, but they're so closely related that we think, again, of Father Time reaping with this. And of course, Father Time and death often has his sickle as well, scything the grain. All right. Now, Kronos and Rhea are the new, heads of the heavens. But, unfortunately, Kronos receives a prophecy that one of his sons will overthrow him. You see there's a little pattern going on here. Well, he doesn't want to make the same mistake as Dad, right? I'm not going to make that same mistake again. So instead of putting the babies back in Mom, I'm going to try something else. For the next several years, every time Rhea gives birth to a new child, Kronos takes the child and swallows it whole. And he does this again and again and again. I don't know if we have any fans here of the great Spanish painter Goya. Anybody ever heard of Goya? He did these beautiful paintings, or not really paintings, they're drawings called Los Caprichos, the whims. And there's a famous one called Saturn Eating His Children. Have you ever seen it? And there's this bestial guy, he's just bit his head off his kid. Now, in the typical myth, he swallows them whole. He doesn't bite their heads off, but these crazy Spanish. So anyway, bites the head off. Wonderful stuff. Anyway, so Kronos keeps doing this again and again. Finally, Rhea is now getting really miffed. I go through 9 months, go through all of this labor, you swallow him? She's getting really upset, so she wants help. So she takes one of her sons, and his name is Zeus. See, the gods that you all know about, the gods of Homer, are the third generation of gods in Greek mythology. Again, sky and earth, then the Titans, then what will become known as the Olympians when we get there. So, when Zeus is born, Rhea hides Zeus away. She takes a round, smooth stone, she wraps it in swaddling cloths, and she gives it to her husband. Okay, dear, go ahead. He's so used to it now, he doesn't even think twice. Boom. A little bit heavy feeling in the stomach, but he doesn't think anything about it. Meanwhile, Zeus has been hidden away on the island of Crete. And my family's from Greece, but not from Crete. But the Cretans have these wonderful dances called chorebantic dances, where they smash and make noise and bang drums. It's kind of like rap. Makes you make a lot of noise. And They claim that those dances go back thousands and thousands of years ago, and they were invented to muffle the cries of baby Zeus so his father wouldn't hear about him and come and get him. Okay, so they claim. And if you go to Crete today, they will show you the cave where the baby Zeus was left to be protected. Right? All right. Zeus grows to manhood, and he comes back to avenge his brothers and sisters. Now, don't worry, he doesn't do the same thing. We don't have to go back there, okay? What he does, though, is he defeats his father, and there's two stories. One story says he punches his father in the stomach. The other says he gave him a sort of poison to drink. But whatever happens, when he hits him or poisons him, the father vomits up the stone that he had swallowed, right? And that stone was later moved to Delphi. Have you ever heard of the Oracle of Delphi? And it was considered the navel of the universe. And people would still say this is the stone that was the substitute for Zeus. Once the stone was out, then he released his brothers and sisters who had been growing up and maturing in their father's stomach. Don't worry about these things. It's Greek mythology, okay? But they had been growing up in there. And so when he released them, they were full grown. And we'll go over them in a second. But once he releases his fellow, they're called Olympians because they're going to live on Mount Olympus. Once he releases the Olympians, they gather together, and there is a huge battle that the Greeks called, I love this word, the gigantomachia, or the war of the giants. And there was this huge, huge war. And when it was over, the Olympians, led by Zeus, defeated the Titans. And then what they did to the Titans to make sure they wouldn't rebel again is that they chained them, imprisoned them in a place called Tartarus. Now, what is Tartarus? All right. Most of you probably know that the place where the dead go in Greek mythology is called Hades, okay? And Hades is also the god of the underworld, but it's also the name of the underworld. Hades, in Latin, it's Pluto, or Dis is another word that the Romans used. As you read Homer, Iliad and Odyssey, you're going to realize that Hades per se is not really the same as hell. The people aren't really punished there. They're just kind of miserable. It's like living in Detroit or something, okay? They're just sort of miserable, and they sort of wander around. They've lost their minds. At College Station is like that too. And they just sort of wander around not knowing anything. And interestingly, Hades is a little bit like what in the Old Testament? In Old Testament. What's it called? Sheol. Very good. Have you ever heard of Sheol? Now, it's interesting, but the Old Testament doesn't say a whole lot about the afterlife. It's not so a little bit later we see bits and pieces. Now, why that is, I don't know. My theory of why that is, why God really didn't talk a lot about in the Old Testament and focus more on this life, is because remember, obviously Abraham is the first Jew, but the Jews really become Jews when they come out of Egypt, out of slavery under Moses, into the Promised Land eventually. And what can you tell me about the Egyptians? What were they absolutely obsessed with? Yeah, the afterlife. Absolutely, probably no culture has ever been more obsessed with the afterlife than the Egyptians. So it's possible, I would theorize, I'm not the only one that says this, that maybe God needed to get the Jews, get that out of their mind, okay, move on. Sort of like in the early church, they had to sort of separate themselves from nature because they were still too close to paganism. But now that paganism was over, it was time for St. Francis of Assisi to come along and talk about, animals as his brothers and sisters and stuff like that. But if a Christian had done that in 200 AD, it might have been really confusing, wouldn't it? Right? So, but anyway, Hades, like Sheol, is a holding place. It's sort of miserable, it's dreary, but it's not a place of punishment. But the Greeks believed that there was a deeper area, a deep pit, that they called Tartarus. And that's where the real sinners were punished. Probably the most famous sinner you've all heard of. Anybody ever heard of a famous essay by Albert Camus called The Myth of, if you've ever heard of it, it's called The Myth of Sisyphus. See, you heard of it. And Sisyphus was a bad sinner, and his punishment was, do you know? What did he have to do?
He had to roll a boulder up a hill, and every time he rushed to the top, the boulder rolled down.
It rolled right back down again, okay? And Camus was what we call an existentialist, and he saw that as an image of modern man, okay? A world of no meaning or purpose. You roll it up, and it rolls back down again, right? And there's other famous, we'll talk about some at another time, famous sinners down there. This is the pit. Now, Hesiod, the great poet who tells us about the myths, he says that if you went to the top of the heavens and dropped an anvil, it would fall for like 9 days and 9 nights, and on the 10th day, it would land on Hades. And then it would continue falling for another 9 nights and 9 days till it reached Tartarus, the pit. Now, referring back again to the Disney Hercules, if you remember, the Titans are locked up in Tartarus. Remember, then they're released, okay? A lot of people complained that wasn't close enough to the myth. Okay, excuse me, but the real Hercules is the illegitimate child of Zeus. Is that what you want in a Disney show? I mean, I thought Disney came up with a brilliant way of kind of working that out, where he is a god and loses. I mean, I thought that was pretty cool. And a lot of what happens in there fits, and I like Meg. She's got attitude. I can see right there. There's Meg. She's got attitude. Anyway, so now here's something really cool. All right, Tartarus is where the rebellious Titans are locked up and kept in prison. Now here's something cool. In the New Testament, maybe you've studied this before, what is the word that's translated hell? Well, sometimes it is Hades, right? But more often, does anybody know? I'd be impressed, starts with a G. Good, Gehenna. Gehenna, that was a place where they burned the bodies and stuff like that. It was kind of a perpetually burning place. And so usually Gehenna or Hades was used to designate hell. But this is really cool. There is only one place in the Bible where they use a different word for hell. I'll write down the reference if you want to look it up later. It's 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. This is in the King James Version. It says, God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. Now, if you have one like the NIV or something that has little notes, they will tell you that the word used for hell there is Tartarus. And it's the only place in the New Testament where the word Tartarus is used. Now, who are these rebellious angels? Well, there's two theories. One theory is that it's actually Satan, right? When Satan was rebelled and was cast out of heaven and thrown into the lake of fire. And you can read about that in the 67th book of the Bible. You know what that is? Paradise Lost. All right. Many people believe that's in the Bible, right? But it also may be a reference, and actually more of the Bible critics today see it as a reference. Anybody ever heard of the Nephilim? I think it's Genesis 6. You've heard about them? You aren't a Nephilim, are you? Are you one of them? Let's just check. Okay. Anyway, cool stuff. There's been a lot of books lately about Nephilim. You probably remember in Genesis, I think it's chapter 6, it said the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they gave birth to the Nephilim. And some see Goliath as the last of the Nephilim. So another, and probably this is maybe what Peter has in mind, but notice it's interesting that the one time the Bible uses Tartarus, it's of the imprisonment of rebellious angels. Whether it was the original Satan and his crew or these sons of God who were going into the daughters of men, again, it's a fascinating link that we see. Now, that's the Greek version of the story, that Kronos and his titans were locked up and put deep down. I mean, they were really just pathetic. They couldn't fight against the Olympians. And by the way, I do a lot of constant research and little archaeology, and apparently a new document has been found, and apparently the Titans was actually the second name given to that race of people, okay? There was an older name given to them. They were called the Oilers. I don't know if you know that, okay? But they were so pathetic. These kids are too young to remember the Oilers, okay? The Houston Oilers, perhaps the most pathetic professional football team of all time. They left and became the Titans. Forget it. All right, ask your parents. All right. Didn't work. The joke didn't work. Okay. Now, the Romans had a different version of the story. And this is interesting. And you're going to read this version of the story next semester when we read the Aeneid, Virgil's Aeneid, which is from the Roman point of view. And from the Roman point of view, interesting story. While the great fight was going on, the Titan gods left Greece and kind of went on the run. They literally went into hiding. And the place they went to hide was Italy. And they were hiding in Italy. And does anybody know the word we use if someone has a hidden talent that doesn't come out till you're 70? You know what the word is? It starts with an L. Ever heard the word? The SATs are gone, you don't remember. The word is latent. Have you ever heard that? A latent talent. Latent means hidden. And Virgil suggests, he may not really be right, but anyway, he suggests that from latent came the word latium, which is the root of the word Latin and everything. Okay? Because the Titan gods were hiding out for safety in Italy. And the Romans believed that when they were hiding in Italy, that was the golden age of innocence, a sort of Garden of Eden existence. Everybody was close. Man, God, nature, all were close. The gods were dwelling right there. Now remember, the Roman name of Kronos is Saturn. Now, in the days of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire, every year around the winter solstice, late December, they would celebrate what they called the Saturnalia. And it was kind of a Mardi Gras festival. It was really fun. Everybody got together, all this sort of stuff, right? And they were celebrating, it's kind of weird, they were celebrating a return to innocence, though they were kind of going wild as well. But they were celebrating a return to the old pagan days, you know, like being a UT frat boy, kind of going back to the old pagan days, right? And they celebrated this right around the time of late December. Now, I think a lot of you know this, you may have studied this before, that we don't really know specifically what day Jesus was born, day of the year, okay? But it almost surely wasn't December, right? It was probably in the spring because the shepherds were out on the hill, okay? So why did December 25th become the date of Christmas? Some of you may have studied this. You know that when Constantine became a Christian, and after him the Roman Empire became Christian, how do you accommodate? How do you bring people together? And what they decided to do was celebrate Christmas on December 25th. Now, back then, December 25th was actually December 21st. It was the winter solstice, or the first day of winter, the shortest day of the year. Right? Now, December 25th was important because it was not only right in the middle of the Saturnalia, it was also the birthday of the unconquerable sun. Now, that story probably is true. It is not true that Constantine made up Christian theology if you've read the Da Vinci Code, okay? Now, I tell you this story because it's kind of interesting. A lot of people, especially if you're Protestant Baptist like I am, you might say to yourself, man, there goes the church, you know, watering down the doctrine, accommodating change. But that's not the way they saw it, okay? They saw it as building a cultural bridge to these pagan people who were trying to become Christian. Look, you're already celebrating these wonderful things. Let us show you the true sun god that has come, the true Saturnalia that took us back to the golden age. And we'll talk more about this at the end of the lecture today. But kind of keep that in mind. All right. Once the Titans are gone, it is now time for the new Olympian gods to take control. And let me graph out the Olympian gods for you. And again, you got that handout if you want, but I want to show you, because you probably all will know these names, but a lot of people don't know how they're related. Okay? Now, at the core of the Olympian gods who live on Mount Olympus are the three gods, the three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Does anybody know what Zeus's name is in Roman? Latin name? Jupiter. Okay. I should tell you, I'm saying this to be easy, but it's not exactly true to say that the Romans took the Greek gods and just changed their names. That's not exactly the case. What happened was that the Romans were already worshiping gods that were very similar, and so they just brought them together. So they had a god named Jupiter who became linked together with Zeus. That's really the way it happens. Okay. Poseidon in Latin is Neptune. Very good. So, and then we already said that Hades is Pluto, better known as Mickey Mouse's dog. That thing that's no longer a planet. Though I don't buy it. I don't buy it. It's still a planet. Does anybody? How many of you still think Pluto's a planet? Yeah, there we go. Unless somebody wants to find a new one, so we have 9, that's fine, okay? Like, I'm not going to allow Puerto Rico to become a state because then we'd be 51 states, which is ludicrous. However, if they really want to be a state, then I'd be happy to allow Texas to secede and become a republic again, and then they can join, okay? Which I think is the best way to go. So, anyway. All right. These are the 3 brothers, right? And the story, which is actually told near the end of the Iliad, you may have noticed it, is that Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades drew lots. I think that Zeus kind of, yeah, he rigged it there, did he? But Zeus won the heavens, okay? Poseidon won the ocean, the sea, and Hades won the underworld. But all of them were really allowed to live on Mount Olympus, though Hades, was always kicked out. They blow his hair out, stuff like that. All right, now, there also were some sisters, okay? One sister was named Hestia. And of all the Olympian gods, she's the one we hear very little about. Hestia was the goddess of the hearth and home. Now, that's confusing because Athena also is linked to the hearth and home. But Hestia was the goddess of the hearth that, if you were an ancient Greek, when you said grace at dinner, you would say it to Hestia. She was the goddess of the flame. Now, Hestia was much, much more important to the Romans. Do you know what the Romans called Hestia? They called her Vesta. And who was Vesta served by? Come on, you've heard of this? You ever heard of the Vestal Virgins? Okay. Never heard of the Vestal Virgins? Okay. At HBU, we called them Phi Lam. Anyway. I like Phi Lam, don't worry. Okay. I just want to make sure I make fun of everybody today equally. Okay. So, Hestia is a sister of Zeus, but she just doesn't appear much. Sir not appearing in this film. All right. But there's another sister who is very, very important, and that is Hera. Anybody know what she's called in Roman? Starts with a J. It's the capital of Alaska. Juno. Okay. I don't know if that's where they got Juneau, Alaska from, but anyway. Just like his father before him, Zeus marries his sister. Now, this is kind of weird. If you're going to marry your sister, you're going to either do it because you're super, super to the right or super, super to the left, okay? If you're super, super to the left, it's like, oh, that's cool, let's marry my sister, okay? But that's not the reason they're doing it. They're doing it because they are ultra, ultra conservatives, and they believe that nobody's good enough for them except their family, you understand? Only good enough if you're for my family, right? That's like if your mother keeps her maiden name, that may suggest that she's a feminist and to the left, or it could suggest that she's so super aristocratic and she thinks her family's like God. Like, the people from Spain sometimes have 1,000 names. That's actually not being a feminist. That's being a super aristocrat. All those names are important, right? So it's interesting. So nobody's good enough for you except your sister, right? So Zeus and Hera are the king and queen of heaven. And you've probably already noticed that Zeus and Hera, Zeus is kind of your typical philandering husband running all over the place, and Hera's a little bit more of the nagging wife. And they're always at each other. You saw that already in book 1 of the Iliad. They're always at each other. Although I hope you all enjoyed the moment. Did you get far enough to see when Hera seduces her husband? Yeah. That is one of the funniest things in all literature. And what makes it particularly funny, and you probably realize this but just couldn't understand, that when Zeus sees Hera, he is inflamed with love or lust, and he wants to woo her. And did you understand what he does to woo her? Yes, you are more beautiful than that girl I slept with, and that one, and that one, and that one, and that one, and you're even more beautiful than you yourself were on our wedding night. This is wonderful sort of stuff. So this guy, what are you going to do? All right, Zeus and Hera. All right, the rest of the 12 Olympians are all sons of, ultimately sons of Zeus. Okay, are the rest of the 12. So these are the original 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The other 7 are the generation under them, but they're still considered full Olympian gods. Now, Zeus and Hera spent so much time fighting that in some versions they only managed to have one child together. And if you think about it, they're always at strife with each other. So who's a good person for them to give birth to? The god of war. His name is Ares, okay? Or in Rome, the god Mars, the red planet. Okay? Now, probably the most interesting story is that Zeus had a child all by himself. Okay, now, there was a goddess named Metis. And Metis is a Greek word that means wise, although it means even more clever is what it was. And remember the word Metis, because it's going to come up in the Odyssey, in the most famous pun of the ancient world when he's talking to the Cyclops and says his name is nobody. We'll get to that in a few weeks. But Metis is a god of wisdom or cunning. And she's pregnant, but then Zeus is afraid that that child will overthrow him, so he swallows Metis. Right? And the baby grows up inside, and then one day he's got a real bad headache, Zeus. And he calls the blacksmith over, and the blacksmith smacks him in the head, and out pops Athena, okay? Dressed in full armor. And Athena is the goddess of, she's the goddess of many things, but she's the goddess of wisdom, born out of the brain of Zeus. She is also the goddess of war. This is sort of the male version and the female version of war. She is a virgin goddess, okay? She's one of the, Hestia is a virgin goddess too, and Athena is a virgin goddess. And this is a little bit harder. Does anybody know what she's called in Rome? Minerva. Okay. By the way, just in case you want to know, it is right. The proper Greek way to spell her name is Athene. Okay, and that's how it's spelled in the Iliad, the translation. But it's just easier to say Athena. Okay, that's the way everybody says it. That's a little more Latinized way of saying it. But it is technically Athene, but Athena is easier to say. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
So you said Zeus had Athena all by himself.
I know, that's what's kind of weird. I mean, most people don't realize that there actually was she was a goddess, this Metis, goddess involved, but then she's gone. We never really hear what happens. She's just in him or something like that. But in some ways, he's taking wisdom unto himself, you see? And it makes sense that Athena, who is not only wise, but very clever, as you'll learn when you read the Odyssey, she's incredibly clever as well. Again, Athena pops right out of his head and is, his favorite daughter, his favorite child, out of the brain of Zeus. Now, there's two stories here. Some say that Hera was jealous that Zeus had a child by himself, and so she had a child by herself named Hephaestus, who is the what of the gods? The ugly one. He's the blacksmith of the gods, and he is the only god who is ugly. He's the only god who is not perfect. He's also the only god who does what? What does he do? He works. He's the only god that works. Everybody else is an aristocrat. Hephaestus is the god who works. He's known in Rome as, someone know? Mr. Spock? Vulcan, okay? He also goes by another name, Mulciber, that you sometimes see in mythology. But Vulcan, and that's actually the origin of our word volcano and vulcanized rubber and all that sort of stuff. Hephaestus, but there are other versions that say Hephaestus is the son of Zeus and Hera. So there's two different versions of that. But again, so we've got this. Now, Zeus also had a liaison with another deity, a sort of minor goddess. And her name was Leto, though she's also known in Latin as Latona. Don't confuse Leto with Leda. We'll get to her later. They're two different people. But with Leto, Zeus has twins. Sophia and where's your brother's name? Where's Sophia? I didn't meet your brother. Where is she? There she is. Oh, that's the brother. What's your name? Nico. Nico? As in Nicholas?
Yes.
It's really Nico. Means victory. Cool stuff. Victory and wisdom. We got some gods right over here. So these are our twin gods over here. Apollo and, anybody know?
Artemis.
And Artemis. Very good. Artemis, by the way, is the third virgin goddess. Artemis, Athena, and Hestia are the three virgin goddesses. And Artemis is known by what? In Rome? Starts with the D? Diana. Okay. To know Diana, do I play fawn? I can tell you that right now. All right. Artemis is the goddess of the hunt. She is a kind of a Mother Nature goddess. She likes to hang out in the woods. She has these virgin girls that follow her. And it's kind of weird. These virgin girls in Greek mythology, they all spend their life skinny dipping, bathing naked. That's all they seem to do. I don't know. But anyway, don't peep, guys, or you're in trouble. Okay. So Apollo, here's a good question. What is Apollo's Roman equivalent? Apollo. The answer is Apollo. Very good. It's the one. They must have liked that name. I don't know what, but that name doesn't change. Apollo becomes one of the most important gods because he is the god of light. He's not the sun, but he's often linked to the sun. He is the god of music. He is also the god of reason and of logic. And eventually, the three gods of civilization become Zeus, Apollo, and Athena. Those three become the most important of the Greek gods and the ones that watch over civilization and reason and logic. In fact, Nietzsche coined a phrase Apollonian to refer to the sort of cool, calm, rational side of a person. Right? Okay, another, where I think we're up to 10 now. Zeus also had a little liaison with a goddess named Maya. Now, there's no link to the Hindu word Maya, which means illusion. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes it's spelled M-A-I-A, different ways. But Maya gives birth to Hermes, who is the messenger of the gods, the FTD man. He's got the little wing slippers that he flies around in, right? And of course, he's known by what in Rome? Mercury, right? The planet Mercury. Okay, now we have 11. Are we missing somebody? We're missing Aphrodite. Now, here's the interesting thing. There's two different versions of the birth of Aphrodite. There's the rather disturbing one I told you, but in Homer, Aphrodite is the daughter of Zeus and another minor deity named Dione. In fact, you meet her in book, I think it's 5, when Diomedes stabs her, and her mother says, "Oh, my poor girl," right? So you get to meet the mother Dione, and that's Aphrodite. So there's the two Aphrodites, if you will. Now, this is a good time to mention to you that please understand that Greek mythology is not like the Bible, okay? We don't come to Greek mythology for consistency, okay? The different poets and philosophers and dramatists, they all use the mythology in a slightly different way, right? I'll give you a good example. Those of you that have finished the Iliad were probably looking for something that you never found, and that is a story about Achilles that you all know. And what is that? That he has what? Achilles' heel, right? You know the story that when he was young, his mother, the goddess, dipped him in the river Styx to make him impervious, but she held him by the heel. And so his only weak spot is his heel. And the old tradition says that Achilles was killed when Paris shot a poison arrow at him, and Apollo kind of led the arrow into his heel. Now, it's really kind of cool because in the movie Troy with Brad Pitt, which is a lot of fun, if you've seen Troy, he gets shot. It's really kind of cool. They never say anything about his heel, but when he gets shot in the heel, notice he bleeds profusely. I don't think there's that much blood in your heel, but it's blood all over the place. But I want you to realize that Homer, he would have known that story, but he doesn't use it. Nowhere do we have this story that Achilles has impervious skin. Why does Homer do that? Well, I think probably the best answer to this is that he wants us to understand that Achilles is the greatest soldier of all time, not because of some trick, but because, he's the anger, and he's the greatest soldier. He just is the great soldier of all time. We don't need to give him a trick. So different writers and poets and even philosophers like Plato or Socrates will use the myth the way they want to. A good example of this that's closer to our day, anybody here a fan of King Arthur stories? Okay? Every time you see a new movie or version or book or something, everybody does something slightly different with Arthur. They do something slightly different with Guinevere or Merlin. But in whatever version you tell, Guinevere has got to have an affair with Lancelot. That's got to happen, but I saw one version, I think it was called First Night, where Guinevere and Lancelot haven't actually done anything. They like kiss each other goodbye, and Sean Connery catches them. They actually haven't had sex, right? Other versions they do. You can change things around, but there are certain things you can't change, right? You just change. And the movie Troy took a lot of liberties with the book, and most of them were justified except one thing that was absolutely a no-no. And if you've seen Troy, who gets killed in Troy? How many of you seen the movie? Maybe it's been too long? Okay, in Troy, Menelaus is killed by Hector. That was a no-no. Menelaus is one of the few people that gets home, okay? You can't do that. Other things, though, the movie Troy takes the gods out. That's a big blunder, but you can still do it. You use the myth to say what you want. Okay, what about Helen of Troy? We'll get to her later. There are some versions where Helen is just nasty. She's, slut from hell or something, right? There are other versions. In the Iliad, how is Helen treated in the Iliad? Negatively or positively? Yeah, she's treated with great, what word do I want to say? He's kind of sympathetic to her, you'll notice. There's another version where, by Euripides, the playwright, that says Helen actually never went to Troy. It was a phantom or ghost of Helen that was taken there. So she was never unfaithful to her husband. So you can do all different things in accordance to what you want to say, what the theme is. But we don't do that with the Bible. Well, some people do that with the Bible. They're called heretics, okay? And, if you were my kids are grown now. When my kids were growing up, I would read to them Greek mythology, I would read to them the Bible, and they would ask, well, how do we understand the difference between the two? And one of the things I said to them is that the Greek mythology is like a candle, and the Bible is like the sun. Now, there's two reasons. One, because this is just a little light pointing towards the greater light. But think about it this way. A candle is something you carry with you wherever you want to go. If I want to illuminate this room, I take the candle. If I want to illuminate, I take the... But the sun, we don't move the sun. What do we move? We move ourselves to get into the sun. You understand? But you need to understand, Greek mythology is never meant to be consistent. You do with it what you want to do, but there are certain rules. I mean, the Trojans can't win the Trojan War. Understand? Okay? Hector cannot live. Hector can't kill Achilles. So there are certain game rules, but within that, the different people, when you get to Aeschylus's Oresteia, you're going to get a very different view of Agamemnon, a very different view of the Trojan War than you got in Homer's Iliad. So that's part of the fun. You're using this stuff as raw material to do with it as you will. Okay. So these are the 12 Olympians. Now, even though they're the 12 Olympians, there are two other gods that are extremely important. Technically speaking, they're not called Olympians because they don't live on Mount Olympus, but they are extremely important. And those two people are, the first one is actually a sister of Zeus, and her name is Demeter. Demeter is the true Mother Earth. I mean, like I said, Artemis has elements of Mother Earth, but Demeter is the true Mother Earth. In Latin, she's called Ceres, and that makes sense because that's the root of our word cereal, right? Artemis is the goddess of the grain, who watches over the grain and the cycles. Now, a lot of you know a story about Demeter. It's one of the most important stories from the ancient world. Demeter was Zeus's sister, but Zeus slept with her as well, okay? And they had a lovely daughter named Persephone, or in Latin, anybody know? Name is Proserpine. Okay. Now the story is that Persephone wanted to be a virgin. She wanted to stay a virgin, and she wanted to follow Artemis and all that. And Aphrodite was getting really upset about this. Too many virgins out there. They're foiling my love plots, right? You've probably already heard that I'm notorious for trying to match people up, and I will, because I'm afraid there's not going to be another generation, at least not another legitimate one. Okay, so my job will be to match you up, okay? Pretty soon we're going to make a guarantee. You want a guarantee? Okay? And by the way, ladies, be happy to know that the male-female ratio is more even in the Honors College than in HBU as a whole. So you have a little more chance here. Okay. So, a little more. Not much. So anyway, just a little one, okay? Anyway, I was telling some of the girls at the party that I've come up with a way to fix everything up for the girls, because there's just like two to one almost. And that is, we changed the university's name to Houston Mormon University. That's all taken care of. It's just a thought. It's just a thought. When I was a kid, this statistic was published. I don't know where they came up with this. I'll bet you remember this there, Clay. There was a thing published that said if you're a woman in your late 30s and you're not married yet, you have more chance of being kidnapped by international terrorists than getting a husband. I'm serious. Somebody published this. They probably lost their job. I don't know. Anyway, do you remember that? You remember? Yeah, it was a long time ago. Anyway, I don't want to scare you. This is the place. This is the place to go. I've already matched up my son with an honors college girl, and my daughter may come here next year. So you guys better behave. If you want to turn your resume in right now to date my daughter, you can send it in. So, all right. along with a $100 application fee. Anyway, why not make some money, you know? Anyway, so now the story goes that Aphrodite was upset. And so one day, Persephone was out picking flowers on the island of Sicily. If you're on the island of Sicily, ladies, don't bend over. Someone will pinch you. I don't know if you've heard of Sicilians. And she's gathering the flowers, okay? And what happened is that the goddess shot Hades with a love arrow, or sent Cupid to shoot him with a love arrow. And he jumped out. He fell in love with Persephone. He jumped out in his black chariot, pulled by black horses. He grabbed a hold of Persephone and took her down into the underworld to be his bride. Do we have any fans of not Harry Potter? Percy Jackson, yeah, Percy Jackson. Okay, so you know it all from there, okay? Now, took her down into the underworld, right? Well, she just disappeared. And Demeter searched the whole world looking for her lost daughter. And the story goes that in her travels, she came not too far from Athens to a place called Eleusis. And there, she gave herself out as a governess or a nanny, or a nurse, as the British say, to the king and queen. And the king and queen had a son, little boy. And she became the nanny of the boy. And she loved the boy so much that it kind of stilled her grief for a while, right? And she loved the boy so much that she decided that she would make him immortal. So she prepared the fire, right? Because you have to put him through the fire. This happens very rarely, if ever, in Greek mythology. But the idea is that you're going to put him through the fire and make him immortal. But the mother, the queen, was too suspicious. Fatal curiosity, was jealous of this nanny, and so she went in and watched. And when she saw her son she screamed, "No, no!" And she said, "Now your son will die like every other mortal, okay? You've lost your chance for your son to be immortal." But she still took pity on them, Demeter, and she taught the people of Eleusis, starting with the boy, the secret of the grain, right? You all study this idea that, before we had cultivated grains, we lived what kind of life? Something. Hunter-gatherer, right? Okay, there's some people that want to go back to hunter-gatherer. I think it's, what is that movie called? The King and I? Is that what he said? No, I was thinking of the Fight Club. Anyway, the very disturbing movie. Anyway, I had a few female students who that was their favorite movie. I was thinking if I was 18, I would not marry a girl whose favorite movie was The Fight Club. There's just something scary about that. Anyway, hunter-gatherers, we could not build civilizations until we cultivated grain. Wheat, later on corn, which comes from the New World. By the way, did you know that the British call wheat corn? Did you know that? When a British person says corn, he means wheat. When he wants to say corn, he says maize. This may confuse you a lot, but that's what they say in the Old Testament. And if you read the King James, they'll often use the word corn, but they mean wheat. Because the Europe didn't have corn. They got corn from the New World, right? Just like they got tobacco and chocolate and tomatoes and potatoes and lots of other great things from the New World. So only once you can cultivate the grain, starting with wheat, can you actually maintain a population, have a civilization, right? Otherwise, you have to always be on the move, hunting and gathering. So she taught them the secrets of the grain. And later on, a great cult grew up in Eleusis, the greatest and oldest cult. When I cult, I don't mean like crazy, I just mean religious cult. The oldest cult in the ancient world was called the Eleusinian Mysteries. And what they worshipped at the Eleusinian Mysteries, we don't know a lot about it because they had secrets. And if you betrayed their secrets, they killed you, like the old Masons or something. I don't know if Freemasons ever actually killed somebody, but it's in their books. But anyway, I think they just bore them to death with their rituals and they die. But the Eleusinian Mysteries were the mystery of how the grain dies and is reborn. But the mystery of of life and death and rebirth. And they worship there the mother and the maid. Well, Demeter left and she was very upset and she started weeping and weeping and weeping. She went to Zeus and says, "Give me back my daughter or I will let all of the earth die." Because once she starts weeping, everything starts dying. So Zeus said, "All right, we'll make a deal." Right? Persephone may go back with you as long as she hasn't done what? Somebody must know? As long as she hasn't eaten anything in the underworld. because if she's eaten something, that will make her part of the underworld. So they make a deal. They go down to get Hades, but Hades has tricked Persephone into eating some seeds from a pomegranate. You know what a pomegranate? When I was a kid, we called it a Chinese apple. I don't know why, but it's got lots of seeds in it. Okay, a pomegranate. And I don't know if they're from China, but that's what we called them. We also had this thing called a Chinese fire drill. You ever do that? Yeah. Do people do this in China? I don't know, but we called it a Chinese fire drill. Okay. Anyway, so what happened was, now there's different versions of the story. Some say she ate 3 seeds, some say she ate 5, some say she ate 6. Let's just go with the 3. She ate 3 seeds. Well, what's going to happen now? Well, they fight, and they haggle like they do in the Middle East even today, and they decide to cut a deal. Because she ate 3 seeds, she will spend 3 months of the year under the ground with Hades, but the other 9 months she gets to be up in the world with her mother, Demeter. And this is the reason or origin of the seasons, right? Wait a minute. Do you know what that is? You Houstonians? Do you understand the concept of seasons? I'm not sure if you understand what that is, okay? Right? Pretty soon there's this thing called fall, and the leaves, I don't want to scare you, but the leaves will start changing color. And then they will fall until the trees are naked. And then in the winter, this white stuff will fall out of the sky. I don't want to terrify you, okay? I do not believe this thing called snow. Somebody said King and I earlier, so I don't believe this snow. Anyway, so again, by the way, if all the great writers, Shakespeare and Dante and Chaucer, if they all lived in Houston, there would be no great literature. I love Houston, but most of great literature is based on an understanding of the seasonal cycle of life, death, and rebirth, and we're just missing it over here. We have 2 seasons, more humid and less humid. That's our seasons, okay. But the story is that, okay, when she is under the ground, that's winter. When she comes back to her mother, it's spring. The mother, everything comes back to life. Then in the summer, the lazy, hazy days when mother and daughter are lying on the ground and wonderful stuff. But then as the fall comes, as autumn comes, she starts to think about what's going to happen 3 months from now. She starts to weep, starts to get sad. The leaves start to fall. And then she goes under the earth, and the earth is covered with a blanket of snow. This was their reason for the seasons, okay? And it was linked to the seasonal death and rebirth of Persephone. By the way, I was very proud of my daughter when we saw the movie of Percy Jackson, which changed a few things from the books. She said they made a mistake. And I said, what mistake did they make? Well, I think the story takes place in the summer or the spring, and when they go down there, Persephone's there. She shouldn't be there, right? Okay, so I was proud of her. She got that. Okay, now, the other deity who was also worshipped at Eleusis was another god named Bacchus or Dionysus. This is the god of UT frat boys, okay? The god of wine, women, and song. He goes by both names. In Greece and Rome, he goes by both names. Bacchus is the son of Zeus and a beautiful mortal woman named Semele. Okay, now I don't know if you've noticed this yet, but in Greek mythology, the rules work like this. If you have 2 immortal parents, you're a god. If you only have 1 immortal parent, you are mortal, okay? Achilles is mortal, Aeneas is mortal. You are not immortal unless both of your parents are gods, okay? But there's one exception. Well, Hercules later is taken up and apotheosized, like the end of Swan Lake, is taken up into the heavens, right? But here, Semele was a beautiful woman, and Zeus wanted her. So Zeus came to her in the form of a sort of flirtatious guy, a Greek. Greeks, we unbutton our shirt down to here, okay, and wear chains and stuff, okay, and comes to her, right, and sleeps with her, right? Well, Hera finds out. And, Hera always blames the poor girl, like she has any choice in this, right? And she wants revenge, but she wants to do something really mean because she really hates Semele. So she comes to Semele and whispers in her ear, "Did that guy tell you he was a god? And you believed him? What a fool you are! Look, next time he comes, you make him swear to you that when he comes to you, he will reveal his full divine glory. Then you'll find out whether or not he's a fake." And poor innocent Semele makes Zeus, says, will you do, Zeus said, I'll do anything. Remember those bad oaths. She says, come to me in all your glory. And he can't dissuade her of it. So when he comes to her next time, he comes in full glory, and Semele is burnt to a crisp. That's what happens if you marry a Greek man. Anyway, it's burnt. You guys are slow today. Okay, burnt. We're recording this. I'm getting myself in trouble. Okay, now, however, when Semele was burnt to a crisp, she was already pregnant with baby Dionysus. And the story, it's a very weird story, Zeus reached into her burning womb, pulled out the baby, and attached it to his thigh. He actually sewed like what do they call those, a seahorse, sewed it to his side, and a few months later, Bacchus was born out of the thigh, I could get my body parts mixed up, out of the thigh of Zeus. Okay? And that's why Dionysus, even though he had a mortal mother, is actually immortal. He actually is a god, though like Demeter, or like Persephone, he tends to die and be reborn, because whereas Demeter and Persephone are linked to the cycle of the grain, or wheat, Bacchus is linked to the cycle of the grape and intoxication. And if the Apollonian is cool and calm and logical, the Dionysiac is wild and intoxicated and is linked to wildness and revelry and things like that. Okay, now, Bacchus, grows up and becomes a great god, and he becomes a god who dwells among the people. He gives us the grape, he gives us the wine, and brings ease, but he also brings wildness and riotousness, okay? And he is the God who sets us free from the troubles of this world. And he too is seen as continually sort of dying with the grape and being reborn each year, seasonally. And both the grape and the grain were worshipped at the Eleusinian mysteries. Okay, now, everything is going fine until Zeus hears a prophecy that one of his sons will overthrow him. It's happening again. What is he going to do? Well, it just so happens that Prometheus was a Titan, but he helped Zeus overthrow his fellow Titans because he believed Zeus would be a more civilized god. And Prometheus is a Greek word that means forethought. Forethought. He has a brother named Epimetheus, and Epimetheus means afterthought. Anybody know who Epimetheus married? I'd be really impressed if you knew that. He was married to Pandora. Remember the girl with the box? Okay, well, anyway. Now, Prometheus, because his name means forethought, had prophetic powers. And Prometheus knew the name of the goddess who would give birth to the god who would overthrow Zeus. And so Zeus said, Prometheus, you must give me the name. And Prometheus refuses. So Zeus comes up with a terrible punishment for Prometheus. He takes him to the Caucasus Mountains, right there between Europe and Asia. Takes him to the Caucasus Mountains and chains him to a rock. And every day, a huge vulture, sometimes it's an eagle, comes and devours his liver. But what happens at night? It grows back, so the next day the vulture devours it again. Now, you folks think that that is a myth, but that vulture really exists. At HBU, we call him the business office, okay? So they will take all of your money, they'll let it grow back, and they will take it again. It's the IRS. Okay, now, a lot of you are like, wait a minute, that's not the story I know. Well, there's two reasons why Prometheus was chained. What's the other reason? What did he do? He stole the fire from man, right? He took the fire. And it's very interesting because the stealing of the fire is a little bit like the apple, the taking of wisdom, and Pandora also is a little bit like the apple. So there's a link here between the two that unleash these things. Now, Prometheus is usually seen as very heroic, but he also was disobedient to Zeus in stealing the fire. Well, he locked him up there, but after like 1,000 years, the story goes, finally he relented and was brought back together with Zeus, and he revealed the name of the goddess. And the name of the goddess who was to give birth to the person who would overthrow Zeus, be greater than his father, was named Thetis, and she was a goddess of the sea. Now, Zeus said, well, I've got an idea. What I do is I will force Thetis to marry a mortal. And this way, even if she has a son, no way he can hurt me, right? So he forced Thetis to marry a man named Peleus, a Greek man. Now, he really felt bad about this, though. So he decided to throw Thetis the greatest wedding party anyone has ever been given. He invites all the gods to the party, but forgets to invite one of them. And the one he does not invite is named Eris. And that is a Greek word that means discord. She is the goddess of discord. You want her coming to your party? All right? Well, Eris finds out and shows up to cause a ruckus. Like what famous fairy tale and Disney movie?
Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty, very good. What's her? Maleficent. I think Disney made up that name, Maleficent. I don't think that's in the original. Anyway, but the Eris comes, but she's really smart. Instead of just doing something, passé, she decides to cause a real ruckus. She fashions a beautiful apple out of gold, and on it she writes 3 words, "To the fairest," to the most beautiful, and then rolls the apple in and runs off. Immediately, all of the gods and goddesses start demanding that the apple belong to them. Finally, they kick the guys out. Okay, enough of you boys, go. And they come and get out Justin Bieber, it's for the girls, okay? And the girls, that finally there's 3 goddesses who refuse to relent because they're so vain. And those 3 goddesses are Hera, okay, the wife of Zeus, Athena, and Aphrodite. Okay. Now, they go up to Zeus and say, "You choose." Okay. Now, Zeus is the king of the gods. Guys, what is the right answer? If you're Zeus, what do you say? You say, "You're all pretty in your own way." Okay? He's not king of the gods for nothing. If you say Hera, then Aphrodite is going to ruin your extracurricular love life. If you say Aphrodite, then Hera is going to really make your life hell. Okay? So he's smart. He says, "I'm not going to choose. You're all beautiful. You're so sweet." Okay? Guys, remember this, okay? Someday your wife is going to come home and she'll be wearing a new outfit with one of those girl belts. Looks like she stole it from Mike Tyson, And you're gonna say something. You're gonna say something innocuous like, "Is that a new belt?" That's all you're gonna say, and she's gonna say, "What's wrong? You don't like this belt? You don't like the way I'm dressed? You don't like my family? Ah!" Be careful. Beware. Okay. Beware. Okay. I wish the Da Vinci Code was partly right. I wish Jesus did get married, so I can get some good advice. Anyway, so one by one they go to and the gods say, "No, get out of here. I'm not going to choose this. This is a trick question, right? It's a trick question, right? It's like saying, do I look fat in this? There's no right answer, okay? Now, but they're so vain, they want an answer. So they go down to the earth to find a stupid, vain mortal. And they find a guy named Paris, who's also called Alexander. No, it's the same person, or Alexandros in Greek. And Paris is a shepherd. He's out on a hill, and he's watching his flocks when all of a sudden these 3 gorgeous women appear out of nowhere. Okay, boom! And in all the pictures, they're always naked. I don't know, but anyway, you've seen many. It's called the Judgment of Paris. And they ask Paris, "You choose." Paris is just vain enough to choose. But they want to hedge their bets. So one by one, all the goddesses go to Paris and do what? What do you think they offer him? A bribe, okay? Hera says, "I will make you the greatest king who ever lived." Athena says, "I will make you the greatest soldier who ever lived." And Aphrodite promises him the most beautiful woman in the world as his wife. And Paris, being young and foolish, chooses Aphrodite, therefore making eternal enemies of Hera and Athena. This may be starting to make sense in the Iliad, okay? But Aphrodite, of course, loves Paris. Now, guys, guess what? If you were lucky enough to find the most beautiful woman in the world, you think she's been waiting around for you, bozo? Okay? He's already with somebody else. Okay, what are you going to do? Anyway, wonderful stuff. I once teased one of my students and said, "You boys are pathetic. If you can't find a girl at HBU, you might as well just join the monastery or something." And this was his answer to me. This was his answer. He said, "Well, I know that it's 7-1, yeah, but of those 7 girls, 2 of them are already in a relationship, 2 of them are insane, 2 of them are married to Jesus, and that only leaves 1. So that was his pathetic excuse for not finding a girlfriend. But anyway, so guys, remember that if you need something to defend yourself. Now, the most beautiful woman in the world is already married. Who is the most beautiful woman in the world? That's Helen. Here, I don't want to get too far from this camera here. Let me tell you the story. Okay, now, there was a beautiful woman named Leda. Don't confuse it with Leto. Named Leda, a mortal woman. And Zeus fell in love with her, fell in lust with her, and wanted to have her. But Zeus has a weird way of seducing women. Sometimes he comes in strange forms. Sometimes as a bull. In this case, he came as a swan. And he essentially raped Leda. Call this Leda and the swan. And Leda gave birth to an egg. And out of the egg popped Helen. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, if you wanted to make fun of a girl, you would say to her, you weren't born, you were hatched. Well, if any guy says that to you, say thank you for the compliment, because the most beautiful woman in the world was hatched out of an egg. Helen was Spartan, by the way, and my family's from Sparta, so that's kind of cool. All right, now, Helen is the most beautiful woman in the world. And of course, because she's the most beautiful woman in the world, everybody wants her hand as a trophy wife. By the way, since you're going to be reading this soon, I might tell you something that you'll want to remember in the future. That Leda had a mortal daughter with her earthly husband, and her name was, anybody know? Clytemnestra, okay? Who was going to be the wife of Agamemnon. You'll see that later. She's only mentioned quickly in the Iliad. Okay, now, what happens is everybody wants Helen as their wife. And so Helen's father, her earthly father, is afraid that there will be a terrible war if he doesn't do something. So he calls all the kings of Greece to come together and have a contest. And whoever wins the contest will win Helen. But he's smart enough to say, well, wait a minute, what if somebody wins Helen and then somebody steals her away? We need to make sure we'll be safe. And so Helen's earthly father makes all of the kings of Greece swear an oath, a pact, that if Helen is ever stolen away from her lawful husband, they will bond together to get her back. All right. Now, even though, and this is kind of interesting, you've already heard about Atreus. Atreus has two sons, Menelaus and Agamemnon. And Menelaus, even though he's not the greatest and strongest soldier, must be more athletic or something, but he wins the hand of Helen. And I don't know if it's a consolation prize, but his brother Agamemnon, who's actually older and more powerful, has a bigger kingdom, marries Clytemnestra. So the two sisters marry the two brothers. I don't know if they had a double wedding or whatever. The two sisters married the two brothers. Okay, everything's fine. Meanwhile, Paris finds out that Helen is the most beautiful woman in the world, and so he goes over to Greece. And Menelaus, being a good Greek host, takes him in, feeds him, gives him gifts, gives him a great time, and when it's all over, in a way to thank his host, Paris takes Helen and runs off with her. Okay? Well, takes her back immediately. Menelaus, who's apparently good at the war cry, cries out, hey, everybody, remember your pact. And they all come together to make the expedition to Troy to go get Helen back. Now, everybody thinks, well, if it's Menelaus' problem, why isn't he the commander-in-chief? But if you read the catalog of ships in Book 2 carefully, you will discover that Agamemnon has the most ships. He comes from Mycenae. He comes from the biggest, not only literary, but historically, Agamemnon came from the strongest kingdom. And so he becomes the commander-in-chief, he takes the whole expedition, and they go off in search of Helen. Now let's end here quickly. Do these names look familiar to you? Who are they?
The parents of Achilles.
They are the parents of Achilles. Do we understand now? Okay? Achilles was supposed to be immortal. Achilles was supposed to be the son of Zeus. In fact, he was supposed to be the god so powerful that he would overthrow his father. Instead, he becomes the son of a mortal man. That's why Thetis never stops reminding him that he has the shortest life of all mortal men. That's why Thetis has been mourning for her son ever since he was born, because Achilles is going to die, and she's a goddess, and he's going to die young, as she knows. And so what you need to understand, okay, the Iliad takes place in about 2 weeks, the space of it. And in a sense, all the chaos and turmoil that seizes the mortal sphere in the 2 weeks of the Iliad should have happened on Mount Olympus. Do you see? So Zeus was spared being overthrown, but a loose cannon was let loose on the earth, causing a conflict. So the three-generation conflict of Uranos, Kronos, Zeus is healed. Zeus becomes more civilized, but it passes down to the mortal sphere. That is why Achilles is obsessed with his own mortality. That is why Zeus answers the prayer of Thetis, because Zeus literally owes her one big time. Okay, so this is the backstory to the Iliad. Achilles should have been a god. Hey, we made it. Didn't we make it? Oh, I have so much more to tell you, but we will continue on. And I wanted to tell you why a Christian should read mythology, but I'll save that for another day. Well, you know, like I said, let's kind of pick it up, and we'll move out there. And if anybody has questions, we'll go over there.